So in this video, we're going to look at how we sketch orthographics of some of the basic Lego brick combinations. So I've got this one here, which includes the kind of red sloping block with 8 pegs along it. And then I've got a couple of 4x2s sitting underneath it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sketch the elevation of the object. Now the elevation is the view from the front. So what I have to think about is, what will I see if I'm standing in front of this object? So I'm holding it just now where essentially the red block looks like it's got a flat surface, even though we know it is sloping. We've got our yellow and green block, and even though we know the green block is going further back, actually it just looks like a little smaller rectangle. So what I've done is I've given myself a kind of baseline along the bottom. I'm going to pick to, first of all, mark out my overall length, so from the very edge of the yellow block here to the green one. I could measure it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to estimate my sizes. So I'm going to mark a little point where it starts, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a point where it ends. At that stage, what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark a couple of verticals. Now you can do this with your ruler, or you can do it with a set square. It's only a sketch, so I'm just going to use my ruler just now just to get a straight edge. And what I've done is I've tried to get my lines parallel to give the left-hand side and the right-hand side. Now the reason I've projected all the way up is so that I can use those lines to help me with some of my other views later on. Because I've now got my length, what I'm going to look to do is try and get some heights marked in. Now all of these Lego blocks are the same height, so if I was to lay out the yellow beside the red and the green, they would all form the same height. So what I'll do is I'll first of all mark the position of my yellow block, which is there, and that is the same height as the green one. So what I'll do is, using my ruler or my set square again, I'm just going to try and keep that line parallel to my baseline. And again, I'm extending that line as far as I can across. That's going to give me the height of my yellow block and my green block, and it's also going to give me the height, the base level for my red block, which happens to be again the same height as my green and yellow blocks. So I'm going to mark essentially the same distance again, just one up. Once I've done that, I'm going to follow the exact same process and extend that line across there. What I've now got is a kind of perimeter for my overall object that I can start adding in some more of the information. Now because that yellow block is 4 pegs long, what it's going to do is it's going to form basically halfway along my object. So I'm going to look along this line here, mark approximately half, and then I'm going to mark my line going vertically up. Again, I'm extending that line all the way up. Even though it's not going to help me with that part of the drawing, it is going to allow me to use it for some of my views later on. I then have to look at the distance from here to here and that gap that's left between the green and yellow block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to half this distance again. So mark a little point there. And again, I'm just going to extend that up as far as I can, making sure that I try to keep the lines parallel so they don't end up getting closer together further up the page. Now that I have that, what I can do is I can start to mark out the main kind of parameters of what I'm going to keep. So I'm going to move from using a very light construction line to moving a firmer outline. So lean a little bit heavier with the pencil, making sure I mark what I want to keep. So I'll do that just now by marking the left-hand edge and marking up the right-hand edge. I'm then going to add this line here as a vertical and this one here. And then I'm going to mark in the bottom, leaving a space in between here and here. And then adding one continuous line along there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another line up here. But before I do that, you'll see that on the front edge of our little sloping block here, there is a very, very narrow, thin surface running along the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to approximate the measurement of that and I'm going to add that in. So it's only about 1 millimetre or 2 along the bottom, and again I'm going to extend that all the way across because that needs to form part of our drawing as well. When we're looking at that surface, we can see that flat surface. I'll add in this top line here, and then the other thing that I would need to do is mark in where all the little studs are. Now there's 8 of them, so it should be 4 in this half, 4 in this half, and they should be pretty evenly spaced. I'm going to get a height for them. So again, it's only another 1 millimetre or 2 above it. So I'm going to extend that line across the page because I'll need to use it for some of my other views. And then what I can do is I can mark the width of each stud and the gap in between them Now again, I'm approximating the measurements of these, but they should be pretty evenly spaced along the top. And there is 8 of them, and they would all get firm outlines. I've not used a ruler for that bit, but you could if you wanted to, just to get it a little neater, a little more accurate. And what that does is it gives me the elevation of my object, and what I'd be able to do then is add a bit of colour to it, just to indicate the different blocks that are there. So my red block would be along the top. Just to show the clear difference to them. Now, normally in an orthographic, we wouldn't render them. We wouldn't add colour to them in any way. However, this is going to be quite useful for us being able to tell the difference between our different surfaces and our different blocks, which is going to be really important as we go into our other views. So the yellow one is underneath there, and the green one would sit just below that one as well. So now that I've got that, what I can do is I can start looking at some of my other views. Now it's really important to consider where you're placing these other views. So we've got our elevation, which is the front, which should be visible right in the middle of our page. Our plan view is a view from above, and it's positioned directly above our elevation, essentially flipping it like that so we can get a bird's eye view. So you can see in this view, the yellow block is entirely obstructed. We can't see any of that at all. And we can't see half of the green block, but we can tell how far back it goes. So what I'll do is I'm going to consider placing this a little bit further up, just so it stays in shot so I can see it. And I'm going to start where I'm going to have my front edge of that red block, which will be a little bit above the elevation. So I get my line going across here. That creates that front edge. And again, you can't tell from when we're looking at our plan view that that surface is sloping, certainly not an orthographic. But you can see about halfway back, we've got this line here, which is the top edge of it. And then we've got this back edge of that block. So I'm going to mark the overall thickness of that red block, which is about there. I'm going to take that across. And what I'm then going to do is I'm going to mark the depth of my green block. Now I'm not going to mark that one all the way across, because it's not going to help me with too many of the views, and it might mean that I accidentally add too much information to it. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to add this line here, which, like I said, is about halfway back. And then what that would allow me to do is mark again the position of all my little studs. Before I do that, I'm just going to mark in the perimeter of the rest of my object. You can see the green one doesn't travel all the way. It does go underneath, and we'll talk about things like hidden detail in other videos, but just now we're just doing it without any hidden detail. If we can't see it, we're not drawing it. And I'll add that line in there. And remember, again, changing from a nice light construction line to a firm, crisp outline, saving us the need to rub anything out. To make sure that all my studs line up, what I'd be able to do is just project all of these lines up parallel. That'll allow me to keep all of the spacing exactly the same as it is in the elevation, which is really useful. It's important in orthographic that we try and use projection and we try and keep things in line. So each of these getting projected up, and what that's going to allow me to do is get the exact position of each one of those little studs, because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to form a little square to sketch in all of the little circular stud shapes. So I'm getting the same space up there and the same space in there, and what it then means is in each one of these I can sketch in my circles, and they should be consistent in size, they should be consistent in spacing, as best as you can. And again, I could do the exact same thing, because the alignment of the studs on the green block would be exactly the same as it would be on the red block. Difference being that there should be 4 visible on the green block at the back. So again, adding them in. And again, what you'll be able to do is add some colour to that, just to indicate the 2 different blocks. So the reason I tend to do the plan and the elevation first is because they're the ones that are most easily identifiable. A lot of time we get a little bit of confusion of what elevation or end elevation should go where. So I'll add in a green just to indicate that as well. And again, the colours are there just to represent. We're not worried too much about the quality of the rendering. That's something we'll pick up in later videos. Now, in terms of your end elevations, that's your view from the left and from the right, it's really, really important that you put them in the correct position. Now, when we're doing orthographics, we work using what's called third angle projection, and there is a first angle, but we work in third angle projection. And basically what that means is our elevation is the front, our plan, which is the view from above, is placed above, and our view of the left-hand side is put in the left-hand side of the page. Our view of the right-hand side of the object is put in the right-hand side of the page. So what it means is you have to flip your object round to look at the left-hand surface so you can put it on the left-hand side of the page. So to get us to see our left-hand surface, it means turning it this way. I'll put it there just so we can see it a little bit more clearly. And you can see when looking at that left-hand surface, we now can see the yellow block, we can see the slope of the red block, and we can just see the green block sticking out at the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a starting point, which is over here, and that's going to be the front edge of our yellow block. I'm going to project that up, and then I'm going to set the depth of our yellow block, which happens to be the depth of our red block as well. And then I'm also going to set the depth of our green block, which is exactly the same distance as the yellow block is. So that size there and that size there should be the same. So I'll add that into here as well. Because I've projected lots of these lines across from the back, what I'm able to do is use some of these to help me get the rest of the object set up. The only size that I'm missing at the moment is that depth going back on that slope. I've got the start of the slope, I've got how far back it would slope back there, I just need to add this back in. I can obtain it from looking here. I can look there and say, well, what distance did I choose there? I need to add that in, which was about halfway. Again, what I could do is I could project it all the way down. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look for what dots I have to join together. I'm going to start by completing my yellow block, which would be here. Just a simple little rectangle, very similar to what we did for the elevation for that one here, because we're now looking at the side of that yellow block. So we're looking at that left-hand side, I've added that in. What I can then do is I can add the back edge of the red block, which doesn't go all the way to that top line. Remember, that top line is for our little press studs to clip the blocks together. So I'm going to transfer my size across to here. And then rather than joining right down to that bottom corner, my slope joins to this second line up, and I add that in there. And then what I'm able to do is add my little stud on the front there, or on the top even, and that means I've now got this shape and this shape. All that I'm left to add is the start here for, the end here for my green block. Add that in, add the bottom for it. Now, because there's nothing stacked on top of that green block, I can actually see those press studs. Those little studs just happen to be the same height as the start of that slope. So what I can do is I can use this line that I took across and add in my studs at the same spacing. And what I've then got in terms of this one is I'm able to add the green, add in the yellow, and then also add in the red on the top. Now, even though when you're looking at this object on the camera, we know that that green block is further away and it looks as though it has become a little bit smaller just because of the perspective of the camera and the perspective of our eye. We don't show it as being any further away. We show it as if it's been photographed and it's been flattened out. So even though we know that's further back, this view doesn't give that away to us. It's only from these sorts of views that we can tell that it's placed further away. So now for the right-hand side of the object, we just flip it around the other way and we put that on the right-hand side of the object. This time the yellow block is completely out of view, very similar to what was in our plan view. We've got the red, this time sloping in the other direction, and we've got the full length of the green block there. Actually, the whole depth and height is going to be exactly the same as our left end elevation, but what we need to do is turn it to face the other way. So very similar process. Mark our starting edge here, which will give us the front of the green block this time and the front edge of the red. And then we mark the depth of it, again, which should be exactly the same as this depth over here, or as close as you can make it in proportion. And then the same again one more time. We know already where the sloping edge of this red block starts and finishes. We just need to add where this point is, which is approximately halfway. I'm not going to bother extending that all the way up and down because it's not going to give us any more extra information at this time. All I'm going to do is I'm going to join it to that front edge. Because we've already been through that process, it's a little shortcut we can take at this stage. It then means I can round off the rest of my red block. Remember, not going to that very top edge because we know that's for our little press studs. I am going to extend the line all the way back because that's going to form the edge here of our green block. I'm going to bring this down to the front and this one here. And then last of all, I'm going to add my lines at the top and at the bottom. And then all that's left to add in is our little press studs again at the top here. Just a single one on top of the red one, but we know we can see two on the green one. I've not added that line through the middle there. I've not turned that into a solid outline. I've left that as a construction line because although we know that yellow one's behind it, we can't see it based on the view we're looking at. So we don't add that line in just now. But in later videos, when we look at hidden detail, you would see that. So adding in the green there to show that, and adding in the red as well. Now the last thing that we would do in terms of this orthographic is we would just add our view labels. Really important that we label them nice and clearly so people know what view we're looking at. So we've got our elevation from the front. It's always written in block capitals. So we've got our elevation, we've got our plan, we've got our right end elevation, and then we've got our left end elevation at the other side. Now by doing that, what we've been able to do is give the person viewing the drawing a clear understanding of how this object looks from all views. We've got our view from the front, which is our elevation. We've got our view from the top, which is our plan. We've got the view from the left, which is our left end elevation. And then we've got our view from the right, which is our right end elevation. You'll notice that the height is consistent all the way across the elevations. The length of the elevation is the exact same length as the plan. And the depth of the plan is the same depth as both of the end elevations. Because just because we've rotated it through different views, it doesn't mean it's changed size. Okay, so just because we walk around the corner doesn't mean it's getting any taller, any shorter. And that's why we've used that projection method to try and keep everything in line to make sure that all the sizes are consistent and in proportion.